This episode of Small Business Leaders Podcast is brought to you by Adams Lane Photography. Right now, we want to welcome Dr. Kim Snider of Village Family Chiropractic. This is part 2 of the series. We just couldn't get it all in one. So I want to welcome you back to the table and continue the conversation. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Your story, as people have watched in part 1, it kind of gives the background of how you started, why you started, having a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and psychology. Somehow you moved to chiropractic. And if you don't know that story, please go back and watch part 1 because it's amazing. And she and her family have ended up here in the Triad in Kernersville, am I correct? Mm-hmm. With their practice. And the practice serves so many different purposes. And go ahead and tell us all the avenues that the practice serves, just for...
Yeah, from pediatric, perinatal services, chiropractic, childbirth education, massage therapy, lactation consultant, functional med.
Like everything.
Yeah.
It's just like you're Wonder Woman. Keep growing. Now, I want to get into the family aspect a little bit and about your journey. So funny enough, if you haven't watched part 1, I didn't meet Dr. Kim at this particular Women in Business conference, but I did hear you speak. And it really was life-altering for me. So for 30 minutes, you got up and you talked about supplements. Your theme at that one was to tell people how to better get through winter, and especially women, and all the effects that winter has on our bodies that literally change from season to season, and how we can minimize some of the sicknesses and some of the depressive days that we might have in that time period. But halfway through that, you begin to give a very touching and real testimony about yourself and the winter that you have been in for a little while now. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to touch on that and just tell us about your winter.
Yeah, I was asked to speak on winter at that conference. And whenever I got the request, it kind of made me chuckle a little bit. I was like, of course. God wants you to dive in, you know, dive into his glory and dive into his provision and catching you in faith. So we focused, I started with just focusing on how we do winter. We're doing it all wrong. We are overscheduling ourselves, and we are stuffing ourselves with, sugar and alcohol and lack of sleep and more stress. And then the quote unquote sick season hits, and we are all just baffled by this. How did this happen? How did this, it's just the sick season's just out there hunting us, Mm-hmm. And reality is it's just a lack of vitamin D, lack of hydration, lack of sleep, lack of caring for ourselves. And then we set up that environment, and our body falls to what our environment has been creating. Mm-hmm. And so I talked about how, we should take really a page out of nature's book. Watch what God has nature do in winter. It is to conserve our energy. It is to pull back, draw back. It's not the time to make lofty decisions and lofty goals in our lives. Like, we are programmed to just settle in for winter and care for ourselves, which is the opposite that we do. And so I do feel like that is a big root cause of any type of sick season, flu season, whatever you call it. But, sometimes your winter hits you in the middle of, summer. Yeah. And that winter can be anything, really. For me, this time last year, actually, I just got back from the beach with our family friends. It was a beautiful week, and something had, I couldn't sleep that night. It was 4 a.m., and oddly enough, I just felt the desire that I just needed to do a breast exam. I felt like God kind of was like, we need to check these out. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. And I found a lump. and instantly went into pure panic. I texted 9 different people, from oncologists to OB who are friends to midwives that are friends, doulas, anybody in women's healthcare that could just give me an idea of what to do now. And I somehow fell asleep, maybe 30 minutes, and woke up to all these text messages of, okay, let's start here, start here, start here. My midwife was able to get me in that morning, check me out, and was like, yeah, let's, just explore this. We did thermography first on that Friday, but then she did encourage an ultrasound as well. I'm not a fan of mammograms. It's too much radiation. And so, but it's virtually impossible to get a ultrasound without a mammogram.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. If they suspect something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more invasive to least invasive in their world. And that's not how my world works. I go least invasive to more invasive. So I was able to get a HER scan. God just worked out so beautifully in this way. I did the thermography on Friday. I was able to find a place in, it's right outside of Statesville, that would do an ultrasound without a mammogram. But before I could get in with them, HER scan, which is a mobile ultrasound
I've heard of that.
bus or clinic.
Like it comes around.
Yep.
Yeah.
It'll be around the area now because it was very, very around with breast cancer awareness around that time. But they were in the area on Monday and Tuesday. And so I went ahead and set up a appointment, went in and got an ultrasound, and they recommended, within a couple of days, I got the results back, and they recommended that I go to the breast center and explore that. So I did. We did a mammogram, another ultrasound. I agreed to a biopsy. There was a lot of advocacy in that arena too, because they wanted to put a clip in, which for me, I did not want something
I don't even know what
foreign.
That is.
So when you do a biopsy for potential breast cancer, they put a clip in there for if it is cancer and they need to go in surgically, they know where it's at. But for me, whenever I was talking about common sense, I was kind of like, this is a huge lump. You're going to tell me you don't know where to start?
Right.
So I was like, no, I'm not going to consent to a clip. One of the nurses there actually did say, on my way into the ultrasound, she was like, I'm so glad that you advocated for yourself. More people should do that. Because it was an uncomfortable conversation with the doctor, but I mean, it was one that needed to be had, where I was like, that just doesn't make sense to me, and I would like to do the biopsy without the clip being put in. And he explained several times why, and I was like, I understand that why, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah. And so it was an uncomfortable conversation, but it was one that needed to be had, and one that definitely even the nurse was like, I'm glad that you had that conversation, and I wish more women would advocate for themselves in this arena. And so we did the biopsy, and then October 11th, it came back as invasive ductal carcinoma, so breast cancer.
Tell me what that felt like in that moment. Do you remember?
Yeah, for sure. The words, though, I don't know. It's like if you could just input somebody's brain in yours for that moment. We dropped our boys off to preschool. The girls were already in school. We dropped our boys off to their school. And then Joe and I sat in the car and opened the results together because we didn't want to do that there. We didn't want them to tell us. And I wanted to get back into my prefrontal cortex so I could make educated decisions as opposed to emotional decisions. And so I was like, let's get the emotion out of the way, whether this is, yay, it's nothing, or we have a journey ahead of us because it is something. And so we opened it, and I will say my whole body kind of went numb. I felt like I went out of my body for a little bit. Disbelief, all the grief. I think all the stages of grief started happening. This is not right. They've got it wrong. This is somebody else's diagnosis. Maybe it's not that stage. I mean, it was all the things.
What did they say the stage was?
1B
Okay.
at that time. So it was, all the things kind of, anger, sadness, confusion, bargaining, all the stages of grief happened in that 45 minutes in the car. Mm-hmm. And then we had to leave to go to the doctor's appointment. So we went there, and they kind of explained everything, how this looked like. From the beginning, I asked them about kind of non-standard of care in their world approaches and what this looked like.
Okay.
And pretty much from the beginning was like, they all but said, you know, I would hate for you to go that route, get worse, like I've seen so many times before, and then come back on your deathbed. And I was kind of like, that didn't sit well with me because I felt like it was a fear tactic a little bit. I didn't appreciate it either, considering I was in a very, very high fear state anyways. So very early in my journey with this, I was kind of realizing they are not the people to be talking to about this. You know, if you want to do something different than standard of care, you don't need their blessing, one, but two, it's just really not in their wheelhouse. So why even stress yourself out about it?
Yeah.
Arguing, quote unquote, with them.
I mean,
it wasn't worth it. And so early on, I was like, well, I'm going to get what I need out of this world, but I also have to explore the other world and kind of look at all my options.
Yeah.
Because there are options. They don't make you feel like there's options, but there are options.
So did you feel very pressured to make a decision right then?
It was instant. Let's get you scheduled for surgery. Let's get you scheduled for chemo. Let's get you scheduled for radiation. And then we'll do 5 years of hormone blockers. I mean, without me even talking to
And for them, there's no other option.
No other option.
That's it. You're within that lane.
That's what you have to do.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And then if you, like you said, want to look at other options, then you're viewed, or you feel like you're viewed. I think you are viewed.
Yeah.
In a way that is very uncomfortable.
Well, it's like it's like it makes you feel ignorant and almost like you want to die, because if you wanted to live, you would do everything I said.
Right.
Probably feel angry too.
Yeah.
I would think.
Well, you know, one thing that came out in speaking with my family fairly delicately about this, not that my family was all that shocked on how I chose to go about this, but it's cancer. So it's different than how I deal with when I got COVID or the flu or whatever, right? So it's different. For me, though, I was like, is it really all that different, though? Is your body is still functioning within the environment of which it is given and choosing the best option for you. Mm-hmm. Your body didn't turn on you. It didn't all of a sudden get stupid and develop cancer. It is choosing that is the best option for you right now and encapsulating that cancer in a tumor. Thank you, body, for doing that. And so from the beginning, there was that fear of like, oh my gosh, this cannot be happening. Oh my gosh, I'm going to die. You know, these things did go through my mind. Mm-hmm. But thank God of how I have learned to respect and honor God's creation of our body, because I really did look at it as, thank you, body, for protecting me, because you did encapsulate this. Because without it, maybe it went somewhere, maybe it could have gone everywhere.
Never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
That is an amazing way to think about it.
Yeah.
Was there any part of you in there that said, well, I did this or I did that, and that's potentially... Did you shame yourself at all?
Absolutely, without a doubt. There was two parts. One, you live so healthy and so clean, and you're so aware of all the chemicals you put in and on your body. You talk to your patients about it constantly. And I got cancer. Wow, great. Thanks, God. You know, there was that initial, I can't believe it. And then there's this other way that goes back to how we were talking about just our decisions. And before you found this life, you smoked, you drank, you didn't care what you put in your body whatsoever. I mean, there was a lot that went into this that isn't just our decisions a year ago, right? Our body keeps a score. Our body remembers everything from the conception of our nervous system, which is when those two cells unite. So it literally remembers everything. Things that happen in utero with my mom, all the way to this moment right now, and now, and now, and now. So that was the dichotomy that I was living in of, you've done all this, what's the point? So I did have some times where I was like, well, what's the point of eating healthy and doing all this if I'm going to get cancer anyways? As if that was my life goal, not to get cancer, which it wasn't. But At that time it was,
Yeah.
Sure.
or the other way. And actually one thing that my nurse advocate over at Novant did say that kind of put me a little bit at ease, because I expressed all this. I mean, this was a very intense appointment. She's well trained to deal with hysterical people, I'm sure. But that was one thing that I kind of expressed in an outward conversation with God, really. And she said, who knows where it would have been if you hadn't been living like that. You should give yourself credit where it's due. And so I did take that to heart, and I've kept that on my shoulder. There is points to every decision that we make. And there's merit to it. And your body does remember those too,
Yeah. I mean, there's a book named Your Body Keeps the Score. And we've read that. And it's, it's life altering when you look at it that way. And I don't know if it was a while ago or if I said it off camera, but I also had my daughter checked out when she was 1.5 years old. Isn't that weird to say? She was 1.5 years. Okay. She was 1.5 years, and she had experienced a fever for a year, and nobody could figure it out. And anyway, I went to a doctor who did biofeedback, and hers came back so specific that it showed that the mom had norovirus in the second trimester. And when I was 4 months pregnant, I had norovirus, had to be hospitalized, and all of these other things that were just in utero that I thought she was being protected from in some way. And it still got through. And I'm not saying that caused her any irreparable harm, but it is just proving the point that the body does keep the score, and it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And that affected that. So now you've got this diagnosis. This has happened over a period of how many days had you had to get used to it?
I found the lump September 7th. October 11th, I got the diagnosis. So it was about 6 weeks of testing and going back and forth and waiting.
And then
it's a tough time.
Had you decided what route you were going at that point?
So they wanted to schedule all the things, and none of that sat right on me. And so I told her, I'll get back to you in November, because I was just at that point overwhelmed. It was too much. I was baffled by how shocked they were about that. And my husband, he reminded me, he's like, hey, remember, like, there are people that sit in your seat and they make the decision right then and there. Like, you are definitely the minority here. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to keep being the minority, because there's just no way I can make a decision that life-altering after just finding out life-altering information,
No, yeah.
I needed that to digest. I needed to sit with my family. I needed to sit with my Lord, and I needed to figure out what worked better for me. And so I told him I'd see him in November, and I got about 8 or 9 phone calls that whole time wanting to schedule. And I just, went to voicemail. I said November.
Yeah.
To voicemail. Within that time, about 5 days later, we got another positive test, which was our 6th child. So we got a positive pregnancy test. So then I really was happy that I had no appointments to go to, because I had a lot more to think about now.
This is the part, I mean, there's a lot of pauses here and silence here. Because I am trying to imagine what that would feel like. And there's no possible way that I could sit in that decision and in that, the gravity of all of that. And it's almost you're going, what should I choose? Mm-hmm. Whatever I do is going to affect this child. Mm-hmm. So what do I do? Mm-hmm. And what I loved about what you said, especially at the conference, is you don't have to be pressured to make the decision right then on any on any of this. You have the right, and it's probably the wisest thing, is to go and talk to your family and pray about this and come to an agreement, together. And that's what you did in that time period. So you find out you're pregnant. That's happy news. It's confusing, I'm sure. And tell us what happened.
He was a beacon. This pregnancy was a beacon of life for me, that I, what the enemy intended for evil, God uses for good.
Absolutely.
That was my anchor. I was like, okay, we can do this now. And I really think being pregnant protected me from a lot of decisions that I could have made out of fear that I would not have wanted to make. And because they wanted to do surgery, chemo, radiation.
While you were pregnant?
While I was pregnant, not radiation, but they wanted mastectomy. So totally removing the left breast, because I couldn't do radiation. When I said I had no plans on doing radiation, they malfunctioned. Just totally, I was like, well, I'm not going to use that to decide my surgical outcome, because I had no plans on doing radiation. I'm on the fence about chemo. So that's off the table. I'm just doing my research on chemo now. And they were just very like, I don't know what to do with you. Yeah. So I fired several oncologists, because many of them just wouldn't even hear it, or would make me feel completely dumb or irrational, ignorant, whenever really it was coming from a highly, highly educated decision making.
So that's another thing that we point out right there for viewers and listeners. You are paying them. If you're not comfortable, you can move on. You really can move on. And that doesn't make that doctor bad. It doesn't make you wrong. It just means that sometimes chemistry is not chemistry in.
Right. So, that relationship is not good. Just like you would not stay in a relationship where the other person didn't hear you, validate you, and be honest with you in a loving way. Right. You shouldn't stay in that relationship with your providers either. Yeah. And so we went through a lot of providers. And one thing my mom had said to me that stuck with me too, she goes, nobody cares more about you not having cancer than you.
True.
And that armed me. That armed me with every doctor's appointment I went to, because I had to really put a spiritual hedge around me, because I just felt so attacked going into that world. That's not my world that I live and work in. And so I already was kind of real uncomfortable, and going into it now as the patient and being that patient, the one that advocates and asks questions, and I need it to make sense. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I need it to make sense. You're telling me I need to do all these things, and now here's my list of questions back to you. And if they couldn't even just have a conversation without getting their feathers ruffled, well, I don't want to work with you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your ego. Yeah. That's not even you wanting to help me, Yeah. And so we went through a lot, but that's what I armed myself with going in, is nobody, and even with my friends and family that maybe have not agreed with my decisions, I arm myself with that too. Nobody cares more about this than I do. And you are entitled to your opinion, and I am allowed to not care about it. And we can still be two friends and family members and humans together, and it doesn't need to be a big thing.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. So now I've got more armor, because now I have a baby to protect. And so chemo, where chemo was a thought process with the baby, I was like, no, we'll revisit that once he's born. So he was due in June of this year. And I said, we'll revisit that then. As of right now, there's just really nothing to do other than I feel called to go ahead and remove the tumor.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah. So we, when I got back to them in November, we started all the testing and I probably had 3 or 4 doctor's appointments a week with genetic testing and all the things, surgeons and all that. And so we did decide to go ahead to remove the tumor. I felt really called that I needed it done by the end of the year. For whatever reason, that's how God was putting that in my heart. I needed it done by the end of the year. I told them I want the lump out, no lymph nodes. So they automatically, standard of care is that they will remove the tumor, but then they'll also take lymph nodes. Well, your lymph nodes are your garbage disposals.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, why would we do that if my body's working for me? I don't feel comfortable. Like, that doesn't make sense to me, especially if you're just saying it's because of standard of care. And that was their constant answer. I'm like, give me a physiological reason why. Like, because I'm trying to make it, this is how I work in my brain. Physiology makes sense, and therefore decisions that we make have to make sense with physiology. It's how God designed our body. So these things need to make sense to me, and it's standard of care.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. So I said, no lumpectomy. We'll do a lumpectomy, no lymph nodes. I got several different opinions. Thank goodness we're so close to Duke and Chapel Hill. I was able to get a lot of different opinions from them. And there's some cancer institutes up north who actually specialize with cancer and pregnancy. So I got second, third, fourth, fifth opinions with them up there too. None varied too much from standard of care. Some of them agreed with maybe, yes, waiting until the babe got here to start chemo. Most were,
just do it now.
Yep. Standard of care, just go ahead and move on with it. One of them did tell me this from John Hopkins. He did tell me, at some point we're going to create what we're testing for. Because by this point, my question for them was not what should we do about the cancer, because I just felt like it was standard of care. That's what they're going to agree on. That's what they're all trained on. It was, how do we track this in my body now or after the baby's here? Like, what can we do? Are there blood work, different testing, imaging? Like, what can we do here? And I was talking to this gentleman, and I said, so is it an MRI every year? Is it a PET scan every 6 months? Like, what should we be doing here? And he said, at some point you're going to be creating what you're testing for. So the radiation, this is why people are so cautious with x-rays in general, right? Because they don't want to create cancer. But that's all mammograms are. That's all CTs are. That's what PET scans can be. And so he basically was kind of acknowledging that there are risks to these, and to be cautious with them. So that's all I needed to hear. So I put everything on the back burner, and I was like, let's roll with what I'm feeling good with, and that's a lumpectomy. They pushed and pushed and pushed for the mastectomy, pushed and pushed and pushed, and I did give in. And I said, okay, that's fine. Let's go for that. If it'll get you off my back more is what kind of my decision making was. And my husband was saying, well, you got one breast and one baby this time, because, the past 2 pregnancies were twins. I needed 2 breasts for them. So he's like, well, maybe you just need 1 breast and 1 baby. Maybe that's God's way. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay. That makes sense. Like, so much rationalization going on in my brain for something that was not sitting right. But I rationalized it. And I said, okay, well, if this isn't what's supposed to be, then God get in the way. And so I'm set up for the mastectomy, left mastectomy. They didn't have to take any lymph nodes for some reason then either, which I thought was interesting.
Did they get clear margins?
So they did get the clear margins, but the thing with the mastectomy is that it actually turned out to be a lumpectomy, because I had this overwhelming, I was practicing, I was seeing patients, and it was a lunchtime, and suddenly I just had this struck with, I don't know. It was just panic, pure panic. I made the wrong decision. I shouldn't be doing this mastectomy. We have to cancel the surgery. I was absolutely freaking out. I don't know if pregnancy hormones had anything to do with it.
Yeah,
probably. There was a lot going on, and I lost it. I had to leave the office, and Joe and I went to our truck, and I was just venting and talking about it and rationalizing and this and that. And he goes, "Stop. We just have to pray about it." And he prayed over me. And he said exactly what I was asking God for, that I didn't say out loud to him. I never actually said it to him. But he just kept saying, God, if this is not your will, please get in the way. If this is not your decision, please get in the way. And, it's just so much peace came over me, knowing that he's in these details. He's going to be working with me. I'm not by myself making these decisions. He's making them. And so we went back to work, adjusted a full schedule that afternoon. And about 5:45, Joe comes in, and I'm kind of wrapping up. And he comes in and he's like, I just got off the phone and Novant Hospital called and they said they had to cancel your surgery. And I was like, don't play with me. I am very unstable right now.
Yeah.
Why are you joking around like that? That's not even funny. And he's like, I am not kidding. That is exactly what they called. They said that they couldn't do the surgery. And it would just blew me away. And that was what I needed from God to validate kind of how I was feeling already, that the lumpectomy was what I felt best about. I still wanted no lymph nodes, but he gave me the number 4. And so I let them take 4 lymph nodes. And so this is actually really, whenever I talk to people who are walking this journey, 1, you do not have cancer. You have an arm. You are simply experiencing cancer. Any diagnosis.
I love that.
Yeah.
Like, that's my life.
Yeah.
Like,
don't label yourself.
No, don't label.
No, absolutely. So you are simply experiencing it. Let that flow through you and move on, because at one point it will move on. I just lost my train of thought.
So you're going to have the lumpectomy. You got talked into 4 lymph nodes.
Right. And so the second thing that I talk with people who are walking this is you have a say. Like, you don't have to do it the way that they say.
Right.
Of course they have reasons. And if those reasons make sense to you after you've done your research, then do them.
It. Yeah.
It makes great. But if it doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't feel right, there's a reason.
Yeah.
And so you can, again, you hired these people. And hopefully you hired them because you feel good about their decision-making qualities. And so I went to my surgeon and I said, okay, we're going to do the lumpectomy and I'll let you take 4 lymph nodes. And, he, of course, had to, standard of care is 8 to 12. And I was like, right. And I'm telling you 4. So that better be what I see on the surgical report. So we did. We got clear margins. The lumpectomy, I had to wait till I was 15 weeks pregnant. They were able to get me in the very next week, which was the December 30th, 29th, December 29th. Just crazy turnaround for that. I mean, that doesn't happen in a big hospital like
no, and
that.
Especially that close to the holidays. And insurance starting all over.
That's right.
Deductibles, yeah.
Oh, it was, just pure God thing.
Yeah.
And so I went in on December 29th. I was 15 and a half weeks pregnant. And we did the lumpectomy, and they took 4 lymph nodes. January 3rd, I got all the surgical reports back, clear margins, but they did find cancer in 2 lymph nodes. And they said, this could have been 2 lymph nodes that had cancer, and the other 2 they hadn't gotten to yet, so we got it all. They said that's a likely scenario. Or we did not get what's called the sentinel node, which is where the tumor dumps into the first lymph node. So it's like a chain of command. The tumor will dump into the first lymph node. That's your sentinel node. And they said, maybe we didn't get that, and we were at a different line of the chain, and maybe there's cancer still in there. And I was like, so you're telling me you don't know anything? I just felt good that it's out. And now I can start the restorative process of making my body uninhabitable for cancer. Because that was the goal from the beginning.
Sure.
If I kept doing what I was doing, like, our symptoms are just allowing us an opportunity to change course. Yeah. It's just telling us, hey, I need something different than what you're doing.
Yeah.
So listen to me.
Yeah. So here you're going about this journey. You're 15 and a half weeks pregnant. You just had surgery and you're getting all these reports back. My question here too is, how do they not know what the sentinel node is? Like, so I don't understand.
They have a dye that they utilize, but they cannot use it for pregnancy. Lovely. And so they were not able to utilize that, which would show exactly what first node it dumped into.
Okay. All right. That I'm glad I asked that then.
So generally they do.
So your pregnancy was going on fine. You were healing from the lumpectomy, and you were gaining strength. You were doing things to potentially, I would say, alkalinize your body. If I don't know what you were doing, but to feed it the right things.
Yep.
And so you're feeling positive, and then kind of what happens?
Yep. So we're going into our 20 week scan. We already knew that the baby was a little boy. We did, because of everything that had been going on with the cancer, I usually don't get any ultrasounds with my pregnancies. Like my twin pregnancies, they want to do ultrasounds
every week
up to like 12. And I was like, I'll give you 3. So you determine which ones are most important for you. Because I am okay with not having any, but you seem to need more. So I'll give you 3, and that's that. So this one, though, with everything going on, I didn't do a lot of ultrasounds, but I did do the genetic testing, because in my mind I was like, gosh, there's so much going wrong. Like maybe there's something wrong with the baby too. So let's do genetic testing, because I'd never done that before either. All my pregnancies are very hands off. We did genetic testing, everything was fine, but we did find out it was a boy early, so like 10 weeks, 11 weeks.
Oh wow!
So we go into the 20 week, which is usually the anatomy scan, which is where you find out if it's girl or boy. All the kids are super excited. We're excited. We haven't seen him since 10 weeks. I had started bleeding. It was like more implantation bleeding, but I was still concerned, and we did ultrasound just to get my mind at ease, and we hadn't seen him since then. And so we go in January 30th. It was a Tuesday morning, and as soon as they put the ultrasound on my belly, he didn't move. And I knew instantly. And I knew instantly that he was gone. And the tech I can see the panic in her eyes. She's frantically looking around and moving me and the baby. And Joe's just staring, and I was like, a 4-letter word that starts with F was said out loud.
Yeah.
And then Joe was like looking at me and looking at the ultrasound, looking at me, and he's like, "Why'd you say that? What's going on?" And his panic is what got me, is whenever things started settling in on me, because he disassociated. I had to say the words out loud to him.
Oh no!
I said the baby's gone. He's dead, honey. He's not there. And he's like, what? No. And he's looking at her, the tech. What do you mean? Well, try again. Maybe he might be just sleeping. And I'm like, baby, there's no heartbeat. Look at him. He's not moving. And then I just disassociated. Joe came back into his body and realized what was happening. And then it was time for me to just shoop. And that was, I don't remember much of what happened after that.
How are the children?
So at the time they were 10, 6, 6, 4, and 4. So they were very aware that they had a baby brother coming. They were so excited to hold him. They knew that I was going to get pictures of the baby. And so we, at some point, had left the office and drove. It was our drive to nowhere, we call it now, because we just started driving. No idea where to go. Several times Joe had to pull over because I couldn't breathe, panic attacks, throwing up, you name it. I mean, it was really, really bad. Screaming at God, angry at God. I wanted him to come down so I could punch him in the face. I mean, I was just, the anger. So we go home. So we're driving and we just are like, gosh, we just need to be with our family. Like we just need to all be together during this. And so we go home and go for a walk because we have no idea what we're supposed to do.
Right.
How do we tell them this?
Right.
No idea. And we prayed about it. Joe prayed about it. I stopped talking to God.
Yeah.
I'll be very honest. At that point, I had broken my relationship with God, and I did not know if I would see him again because I was very mad with him. This was my beacon of life. My boy was, and in my mind, he just took that from me. at the time. That's where I was.
Which is fair.
Yeah. So we go home and we go for a walk and everything's good. You know, it's getting my mind off of it kind of, but I'm still reeling. How am I going to tell these kids? And they start asking, so did you see the baby today? And we're like, yep. And they're like, oh my gosh, is he so cute? How did he look? You know? And I was like, yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, we can talk about that when we get back. And my 10-year-old, who is just my little, she's got my same brain wavelength, I feel like. She just cut this look to me while we were on the walk, and it was instant, like she just knew. But she didn't say much, but I saw it in her face. She's like, what's wrong with the baby? And so we got home, we pull everybody in. I didn't have to say anything before she just lost it. And she went through everything that I had just gone through on our 5-hour drive to nowhere, screaming and cursing at God, thrashing her. I mean, she was tearing sheets off her bed. I mean, she was, why would you do this, God? What did I do to deserve this? I mean, all this. It was wild seeing what I had just done from the outside as a mother, seeing her do it.
How did you support her in that?
I just sat there quietly. It was hard for me. At first, I really couldn't. She had a outburst downstairs, went upstairs, started just going wild. Joe went up there, and like any tantrum or any expression of extreme emotion with our children, we just hold space for them, making sure they don't hurt themselves or hurt others. It's not a time for rationalization. It's not a time to calm anyone down. It was feel what you need to feel, and we'll be here when you're ready. Yeah. So he sat there. I was downstairs with the other kids who didn't fully grasp it. They got it, but they were kind of like, had a lot of questions. So then when is he coming home? So when are you going to see him? So when are you, all these things I had no answers to. Eventually I felt where I could go up with Annabelle, and she was still thrashing. I just sat on her bed and I just watched her numb. And then eventually she came and just collapsed into she saw my face at one point, and I think she really realized, like, whoa, mom is like
not okay.
A shell of a person. Yeah. And she came over and just laid in my lap and cried, and yeah.
So they had, the doctors had informed you, I would assume at that ultrasound, what the options were.
Yeah, so my midwife came in and talked to Joe. Again, I was completely disassociated at that point. I don't remember the conversation at all, but he kind of filled me in on things. This was a Tuesday. We basically just laid in bed until Friday. And he kind of filled me in on things about, here's our options. They really wanted me to do a D&E. Which is basically they put you out and they extract the baby. You don't see your baby could come out not in one piece, which is a big reason why they don't let you see the baby. And they really wanted me to do this. But again, that did not sit in my heart right. I grew this child. He's at the day I birthed him, he was 20.2 weeks, so 5 months along. It did not sit right that his mother wouldn't see him, and hold him. And so I'm so grateful of the birth community, because I reached out to friends who are midwives in the area, birth providers in the area, and I, of course, let them know what had happened. And I said, these are the options that they're giving us. They're really, really pushing for a D&E. What are your suggestions, thoughts? Like, how can I make this decision? Because it seems impossible. It's another impossible decision. Like with cancer, the diagnosis, those decisions, it was just impossible decision after impossible decision. But you just make the decision and you make it right. Like that's no right decision. You just make the decision and make it right. I felt like I was faced with another one of those. And they were all so loving, and two of them specifically had actually birthed a child at 17 weeks. One was 17, one was 18. And they really encouraged me to go through with the induction and the birth. And I'm so grateful that I did. At one point, the doctor, because I did meet with the OB, of course, and at one point the doctor said, I just don't know why you would put yourself through all of that. And it was so, I don't know, it was such a selfish, such a selfish comment to hear. Because I'm like, what? Motherhood is nothing but sacrifice. I've already gone through the hard part. My baby's gone. Like the best I could do for him, for me, my choice is birth him and go through labor and hold him if I can. I'm like, what do you mean go through it? Like, I've already gone through the hard part. He's gone, like we just got to figure out how to honor him now. And so I chose to go through the induction. And even in this, talking about advocacy, it's just this is just a theme through all life. Even in this, I had told them, no IVs. I don't want Pitocin after. I don't want, if it was up to me, I would not be doing this here. I'd be at home. I can get the drugs I need to induce at home. And I would not even be here, but my husband wants me here. And so we're going to do this here, but this is how it needs to be done. And his response was, well, we'll have to see the day of. And I was like, absolutely not. We're not seeing the day of. We're doing it that way or we're not doing it. And so it was God stepped in at that point because he was on, that OB was on the floor that Saturday when I finally went in. But he told me, you're going to be working with a midwife. And this is a midwife I had never met before. I knew her through co-managed patients, but I hadn't met her face to face. And she calls me. This was on Friday. I took the first round to kind of let things begin. And then the 24 hours later, I went in for the actual induction medicine. But on Friday, I took the first round. We went to eat, and that was when she called me, and she, apologized, introduced herself, and then said, how can we make this the birth that you want? And again, just that validation of somebody seeing you human to human and saying, I know this is not where you want to be. How can we make it what you want? And I was honest with her. I said, if I was, I want to be at home. I'm not comfortable at home because my husband's not comfortable at home with this. I think we need the support, but I just want it to be like it's at home. I don't want to see anybody. There's nobody that's going to touch my baby but me. I just want autonomy and privacy. That's it. And she said, okay. And she advocated to have me off the labor and delivery floor because it was considered a stillborn birth. They had to put me on labor and delivery floor, but she advocated for have me on the whole wing that there was literally nobody, like I was not going to be placed next to somebody with a live birth. Thank God. So I walked in on Saturday, and even the drugs for the induction, she gave to me to do. It's a vaginal insertion, and she even just was respectful from the beginning of that autonomy that I desired and deserved. And so she even was like, okay, here's how you do it. And then you guys have my cell phone number if you need anything. So we're right out here at the door, and this is what you can expect, and just walked through everything, which my friends who are birth providers had already walked me through, but it was just so nice that she took that time and it shouldn't be, these things that I experienced shouldn't be nice to have, right? These are things that are just a human-to-human contact the compassion that should be there no matter what.
In every one of those rooms.
No matter what, yeah. And so God was just so gracious. We went in at 10, started the induction, and he was born at 2:03 on 2/3, February 3rd.
Oh, wow.
And it was perfect timing, everything. Mm-hmm. It was just Joe and I laboring down like we usually do. And then when we named him David, he's such a warrior. And whenever he came out, I caught him. And once it was like I came back into my body, I felt his head, I pushed again, the rest of his body came out, and I reached down and I kind of holding him, and then suddenly the post-birth shakes started happening, and I'm like, is that the baby? You know, and right at that time, Joe had he's seen me in labor. He knows how, when I'm close to birth. And he had already texted Amanda, our midwife, and was like, yeah, she's like, baby's coming any second, you know? And so literally by the time that I could no longer hold myself up and the emotions were hitting, Amanda and my best friend, who is she's like my sister, walked in. And she was so good with this. I mean, obviously David was gone. He was born in call, with his waters intact. And she was no rushing. There was no rush in this. This was an honoring situation for David and our family. And she'd even told me before, she said, there's no rushing after he's born. We can take your time, look at him, hold him, touch him, whatever you want. And she was, look at Mom, you did so good. Look at your beautiful baby. And she kind of helped me orient, because I was just so I felt just my life. And she's like, look at his little hand in there. And when you're ready, we can break his waters and you can hold him. And she was just so good. So it was amazing. As terrible as it was, God was in every single detail to make that the best experience possible. Because I've walked through families with loss, and the loss has been compounded by pushy birth providers, by rushing them afterwards, by, and the grief just gets compounded that way. And then now they have to recover not just from losing their baby, but now everything that happened after too, Yeah,
insult to injury.
Yes. And so God was just really, really gracious in that. Even for me not talking to God at that time, I even still saw that. And I did acknowledge that of like, wow, okay, all right.
So after he's born, you do break the water, you do hold him.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience, how long were you in the hospital before?
We left at 7:30 that night. So I held him for probably 3 to 4 hours. They never asked, are you ready? Are you ready? They never did any of that. It was very much just whenever you're ready, and encouraged it, which was so, my body needed it. My brain obviously was not processing that my baby was not there anymore and starting induction in itself. So for me, I was realizing that as a neurological, my brain and my body need to come together and realize that baby is gone and kind of get on the same wavelength. Yeah. We need to have that. And that's what I encourage any of my lost families of, if you have an opportunity to go through the induction, no, you're not going to feel like you are ready and you can do it, but you are, and you can do it. It will help your body process the grief of it.
Okay.
A different way, a deeper way. It's harder. Of course it's harder, but it's going to help you process differently.
You said in your speech that you went and you just went and laid in bed, and you had a support team to even have you get up and take a shower.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was this time that you thought you could make it to a chair.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine. And that it was hard for you to go back to church. Tell me why that was hard. For obvious reasons, but you had a specific reason.
Yeah. Yeah, those days after, I stayed pretty disassociated. And so I did have people that were responsible for normal hygiene, normal human things. So I didn't slip further because I knew where I was and I knew where I could go. I had our pastors come over and pray over us. Even though I wasn't talking to God, I knew somebody had to be talking to God, you know. And our church was so good at and our friends and our family were so good at just holding space for us and standing in that gap. And nobody, I did not know that I could be mad at God. I was not raised like this. You were happy with God or you shut up about it.
Right.
You know,
right.
like that's
Totally,
that. You praise him or you just shut it. And 4 years ago when we found our church, even God was working even then for this year that I've lived, because I was able to have these tough conversations where I was told, like, you know, your relationship with your husband, do you guys fight? Are you upset with him sometimes? I'm like, yeah, duh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a relationship. That's okay. This is the relationship God wants you to have with him. He's okay for the hard and tough questions and the hard and tough emotions. He made you. Do you think that you're surprising him? And that was so freeing to me to be able to really experience every level of this grief that I was now carrying. And I was scared and I was sad. I mean, I really did feel like my best friend turned on me. You know, I felt like God just really abandoned me. He was my confidant and who I went to for every single thing. And I really did feel just total abandonment. But at the same time, I did know that bridge had to be there still. And so so many people just stood in that gap and prayed over us. And even whenever I couldn't participate, I just laid there and laid in their words. And so I knew I wasn't going back to church. For me, I was like, I'll never go back to church. Mm-hmm. I'm done. But I can't remember what made me feel strong enough to do it. But I decided that I was going to go back. But we had to find a new place to sit. And anyone who goes to church knows that is such a pain in the butt.
Oh, yeah. We all have our seat.
We have our place to go. Yeah. You know, you are emotionally attached to this place, yes. Right? And so, but I had to find a new place to sit because I was one of the families in our congregation was due around the same time. And I just couldn't see her and their family. Nothing obviously against them at all. They have a beautiful, beautiful baby now. But I just couldn't. And that was that was probably the biggest reason why I was like, I can't go back. I got to find a new place to sit. Where am I going to sit? But God called me to the front and I actually just went up, sat right in the front row, and all little nuances that we do to make other people feel comfortable in our lives, I stopped subscribing to them in that time. Mm-hmm. Small things like you walk by someone and you smile, you know.
Right.
I just stopped doing that. I had no affect. I was just totally a shell of a person. And so whenever I went to church, I'm singing, my hands are up, I'm crying at least 7 times during service, you know, like that is my place of expression. And it felt weird being there because I had none of that, but I knew I wanted to be close. I wanted to be with our church family and I wanted to be feel closer to God. And so I just sat there. Everyone's worshiping around me and I just sat there and I stared for a while and I cried. I had somebody, you know, many people come up and hug me and kiss me and pray over me during that time. But that was my first experience back. It got better over the weeks. A lot of screaming and crying down at the altar. I mean, just the rawness of losing a child and expressing it outwardly, not caring how it makes anybody feel uncomfortable. You know, like as a caretaker, I'm a natural caregiver. It's so weird for me to be in a situation where I truly, truly need the help of others. Mm-hmm. Like I'd much rather help somebody else.
But I think with the personality that you have and the strength that you have, some of the only ways we give in is when God humbles us to where we have no other choice.
Absolutely.
And I can say for me, I don't know where I would be without dealing with some of the health issues that are ongoing that make me dependent, not just on other people, but on my Creator. And I'm thankful for that, because I don't know who I would be without that, because I can do so many things on my own. But He's put things in my life, and He put things in your life that you couldn't do on your own.
Yeah.
Not in your own strength, and be okay.
No, and you keep trying, right?
Right.
Like I look back now, you know, it's 9 months now since I delivered David, and I look back now and I'm like, golly, there's so much that I was just like, I've got this, 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 over and over and over again. Not like I don't need you, God, but just not relying and laying it at His feet the way that we are called to and asked to do. And so it really is no wonder a little bit for me that I'm like, yeah, I needed that. I mean, like, I would never wish this upon anybody,
right.
But I mean, like, for me to step into a different level of my faith and my reliance upon just other humans and us together as working towards the kingdom of God together, I needed to go through these things, because now I can look at it as that I'm able to strengthen my faith, be closer to the Lord, closer than I've ever been my whole life ever. And also with the people around me, knowing that we're all just working towards the kingdom of God together. I would never have understood that without going through this or going through something similar.
It's a beautiful painting that only God can paint Himself. And I am not going to pretend that I understand why the choices like that are made in our life. And I told somebody this last night, He sees the end from the beginning. And it's orchestrated, and I have to trust. When I look behind, it tells me my future, how faithful, how the miracles that are there. And so today, if I need something else, it's not that I'm not going to fret for a moment or whatever, but I am going to look back and I'm going to say, oh, okay, You're faithful. I'm going to trust that for my now and for my tomorrow. And that is not an easy place to get to, but it is a submission of our will, because I serve the pleasure of a king. That's just the truth. And however He sees fit, He has the kingdom, and I just want to be a part of that. And so, a part of that is doing and going through things that other people say are unimaginable, or how did you, they sometimes, I don't know if this happens to you, they make your pain bigger than theirs, or, all of that. And I really don't believe that. I think that pain is pain. It just is. And I also believe it doesn't kill you until it does. And in the meantime, we need to live. Instead of dying while we live till we die. And find those reasons every day. But it's okay if there's seasons that you can't get out of bed. It's okay if you need help. You call on that. And I will say that being the one that's been called for help, or being the one calling for the help, either way is a blessing to me, because there's a tenderness when I'm being helped, and there's a tenderness when I'm helping others. So I don't know if that's any type of encouragement. It's just my experience in this kind of thing. I want to get to, and I know that we're coming to the end, but I want to know how you are with your journey of the breast cancer. If that's okay. Okay.
Absolutely. I will say one final part about, David dying, and my relationship with the Lord. The Saturday I birthed him, that Sunday was baptism Sunday, the 4th. And I had put it in my brain that I was going to get rebaptized. The only other time I was baptized was, as a child I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
And so this whole concept of being baptized when you're older and you can make the decision yourself, I never experienced that until I joined the church that we're part of now. So whenever I was going back to church for maybe 8 weeks at this point after everything had happened, and I realized that morning, I was like, oh my gosh, that was the day before Baptism Sunday that happened. Enemy's working really hard for something here. And when I got to church that day, it was Baptism Sunday again, and I had no idea at all. And at that point in my journey, I was so grateful. We had reconnected. Me and God had reconnected. He didn't turn his back on me, even though I said horrible things to him and about him and everything else. And he still welcomed me back with loving open arms and carried me through. And this time I also got a bunch of tests done that I couldn't do when I was pregnant. And they all came back clear and negative. So no evidence of cancer at all. And I was just so grateful to him. I was crying in church, just, how do I thank you? How do I thank you? Enough. I mean, with your grace to me. I mean, I've been such a twat. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, you can say that.
And you love me still. And I just kept hearing the words come. And they started baptism, and I had all the excuses. I was dressed for church, one, but then I was also supposed to take the girls to a birthday party after. I'd be late if I don't have the clothes to change into afterwards. God, I can't come up there. My gosh, my hair's done. You know, I mean, all these reasons. And he just kept saying, like, if you want to thank me, come. And so I went up and I asked our pastor, I was like, hey, Todd, do you have a change of clothes in your office? And he's like, well, I think I got a hunting jacket you could use. I'm like, all right, good enough. So I went up there and Joe baptized me.
Oh my goodness.
So it was beautiful turnaround. Now, a couple months after this, all my kids helped me through this, my grief, because they asked those hard questions that as adults, we put the stop on. We're like, absolutely not. Am I digging in that far? Like, I can breathe today. That's all I need to know. Mm-hmm. They don't care about any of that. So it's 9:00 at night. They're supposed to be in bed and they're like, why did Jesus take David to him that early? What did he need him for? You know, I mean, just slam you down in the middle of the room, and they want answers, you know? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times I didn't know the answer, and I'd be honest with them. But then it made me dive deeper of like, what do I need to know? What can I know? God, how can I help glorify you in this situation with my children? Especially Annabelle, she had hard questions. She was very aware of everything, right? And there are times when I was like, that's it. This is where she turns from God and she breaks her faith. It's enough to break anyone's faith. I mean, because she even said, first my mom gets cancer and then my baby brother dies. You know, I mean,
it's a lot.
It's a lot for a 10-year-old. And so I just prayed and prayed. So maybe this was right before I went to Mexico for a cancer treatment center. So June, Annabelle comes up to her dad and she's like, I think I want to get baptized today. And so I didn't even know it was Baptism Sunday. Nobody said anything to her about it at all. She knew that it was Baptism Sunday though. So it was placed in her spirit by the Holy Spirit for weeks prior. And she asked that day, she's like, I want to get baptized today. So then her dad baptized her. It was just a beautiful, beautiful way of showing, like, no matter what happens, if God doesn't do anything else for me at all, ever again, as if I deserved for him to do anything in the first place, but if he doesn't do anything else from this time forward, I'm still grateful and still praising him, because look what he's already doing in my children. Like, they're already using this as a way to glorify him. And it's just so, so, so special. So all of the testing came back, no evidence of disease. And I decided to continue treatments. If I wasn't going to go like the hardcore chemo radiation in the conventional medical world, I was going to go hardcore in my world, in the holistic world. And so Hope for Cancer is a top holistic treatment cancer center in Cancun, Mexico. And so I decided to go there. So it's a 3-week treatment program. I went there in July, so I was gone basically all of July. I left the day after my birthday.
I want you to know you had mentioned that you were going in July when I saw you in the end of May, June.
Yeah.
And those dates stuck out to me, and I was praying for you and your family with that separation time as well. So
it was tough. Yeah. It was tough. 3 weeks is a long time for mom to be gone.
Yeah.
And it was really tough. And it was intense. So I was down there 6 days a week. You're in the clinic 7 to 8 hours a day getting treatments. And even before I went, I got my heart tested. I got because I knew it was going to be real intense down there with detoxification and all the things that we were going to be doing. But it was emotionally, spiritually, physically freeing. And God met me there so many times. He met so many people there. It's a faith-based center. So we literally started every morning with worship. Wow. We're worshiping with our doctors who are doing the treatments that day, our nurses that are doing the treatments that day. And then we get into a prayer circle. We share anything that may be heavy for us and get that out, because emotional healing has to happen too. If you don't want anything to return, you have to really get all of it out, change all the environment, including the environment between the ears. And then we'd go into our therapies all day. Sometimes we'd even have worship night at night. It was beautiful, hard questions. I mean, people from all over the world were there with all types of different cancers. And if they were leaving with nothing else, they were leaving with hope. Being there was the first time I experienced true somebody understanding why I wasn't going the conventional route. Mm-hmm. Not getting the side eye or the underlying but it's because I love you and I care about you, which I do know that's why people express their concerns. And I feel that and I appreciate their love. But it felt so different and good to be on that path with others.
It's affirming.
Yeah. And to have people understand, for sure.
Where are we now?
So I do treatments and therapies at home. I go back in November for a follow-up.
Gotcha.
To see where everything is. They did extensive testing down there. Everything from ultrasounds to MRIs to hair follicle testing, heavy metal testing, all the testing. So I'm going to go back in November for a week and do all the testing again, see where we're at, see what the cancer is, if there is any cancer going on, but what's happening. In the meantime, I'm still doing blood work here. I have a team of 7 providers. So I have a naturopathic oncologist in Arizona, a naturopath doctor here, an oncologist here who is amazing. He's head of research, and so he's very, very inquisitive, which I love because he's always asking questions. And anything that I bring to him, he's like, interesting. I don't know about that. I'll do my research. And he actually does his research, and I love that. When I said I was going to Mexico, he's like, where are you going? I was like, Hope for Cancer. What are they going to do there? And I said, this, and this. I'm going to do my research on that. And he did. I mean, it's just, he's amazing. So it took a long time, like you're saying, it takes a long time to get your team, but advocate for it. Your team is so important because I don't have to do that hedge of protection every time I go into my doctor anymore.
No, I don't.
I know I'm going to be seen and heard, and I don't know if I'm making the right decisions, but nobody ever does.
No, but you do in the way that you've listened to that still small voice and you recognize it. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't feel right in here, then you just don't do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that when circumstances like illnesses come along, it helps you to tune your ear. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of noise going on. And a lot of people say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And they speak a little bit of death over you in a lot of ways.
Especially with cancer. Oh, that's a death sentence to them. But it's not that.
And I can't tell you how many times I was told I was going to die before I was 25. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a bet before this happens. But now going through the gamut of everything, my spirit has to align. And it may still have been the wrong choice that I said, okay, let's do this treatment. It may have caused symptoms that I didn't want or whatever. But I will say that they were at least thought through, and the physicians that I have around me, and both in the Eastern medicine and Western, I definitely am fortunate to not feel anxiety when I walk in there, like I'm going to be attacked or told I'm crazy or any of those things. So yeah, build a team and don't quit until you have found the team that works for you. The other thing I think it's interesting to mention, I know for you and for somebody like me who deals with you have to have different specialists for different things. So when you're building a team, you need to really make sure, because the community is not set up for one doctor to handle everything. They're trained in specific areas, and that's all they know. And they know it well, but it is all they know.
Yeah.
So I also would encourage, people to get all of those things checked. And I think to your chiropractic, Village Chiropractic is another tool in that arsenal for people to have. You need what y'all have to offer.
Yeah.
So I know I've said a lot and you've said a lot.
Yeah. I think a couple of things I want to mention, because I know we need to wrap this up, is that it's been incredible. I know it's a little different for the type of podcast that we put out, but I think it's important that we cover things like this for a lot of reasons. We don't talk a lot about faith, but we are people of faith, and it's a very important part of our lives. But I think what you said, you talked about the one doctor saying, why, this is what resonated to me. Why would you put yourself through that? And how that made you feel. And then you chose this other path, which obviously it's a harder path, but it's a more fulfilling path. It is the path that matters most. Probably is the path that brings true healing for everybody that's involved. And that's important, because a lot of times we want to avoid that. But even that other path, why would you put yourself through that path? The path that they think you should go through carries things with it as well, and detrimental things on the long end that you can't never get back. So I appreciate you sharing all of that, because there's a wonderful lesson, a bunch of lessons to be learned in that. Not only that has benefited you, but your husband and your family and those around you.
Yeah.
So this is a very touching, meaningful thing, and talking about your relationship with the Lord as well, such a meaningful thing. So I think what I'd like to say about, as a small business leaders podcast, because we've talked about a lot of things, is that one of the things that we're trying to achieve in this setting is not only to give, and we talked about business, but there's also a story behind the people that we have these conversations with. And if you'll listen closely, you think about who you want to care for you, or who do you want to do business with. And when you hear this genuine, meaningful story that's real, that is what I want to migrate toward. And I think that's important in business, because we get exposed to all this politics today and all these different issues today, and
there's a lack of humanity.
It is a lack of, and we see that in this, and everybody that's sat at this table, we've been able to get glimpses of that.
Yeah, and I agree with story, but it also feels like journeys instead of, you know what I'm saying? Like, it is your story, but it is your journey, and what you have taken along that journey is invaluable.
Yeah, and it makes you the doctor that you are, the provider that you are, because you've gone through this journey. And,
right.
Yeah.
So,
well, and those are things that everybody, if you own a business, you still have a life too that you're going to go through. And my biggest thing with my business is my baby. And so when all this happened in December last year, I chose to step out of active adjusting. But I still own a business. So it's like, people are like, oh, that'll be a nice break. And it's a nice break because I'm not doing patient care, I guess. But I still own that. That's my baby. You know, I'm still working those hard hours and experiencing life at the same time. I would encourage any business owner, like, to be real about your life will still happen and your business can still happen. Build your business with the people that love your business like you do. No one's going to love it exactly like you, right? Like, it just is what it is. But build your business with people that love what you do, and they're in it for your the purpose of your business, not to run down the clock, not to make the money, whatever. All that's going to come.
So important.
Yeah. But they understand your mission and what it is that business, where that business started and why. And they want to be a part of it, because whenever you're down, because that's what I've been experiencing since being out, active adjusting, I've gone through so much feelings of worthlessness, not being in my practice the way I was. But when I'm down, my practice is still growing. We're still, it's remarkable. And the ability to put that trust in others, to care for my business, to care for my family members, which are my practice members, my patients, like they're their own, is just such a blessing. And your business will still go on because your purpose is still there. And if you've trained your team right in the love of your passion, don't worry about it. You can still life, and your business will still business.
It goes back to humanity and
I
the
love
importance of people.
Yeah.
Being real. Freaking real.
That's right.
Be freaking real.
Yeah.
Well, my heart is full, and I thank you so very much for taking a chance on this girl that DM'd you on Instagram. I'm like, I know you don't know me, but and you asked me, I forget exactly the question that you asked me back. It's like, what is the purpose of this?
Right. I asked the mission of the podcast.
Yeah. And I was like, nobody's ever asked me that before, but it just came out whatever way it came out. And I love that you asked that.
Yeah.
Because you didn't want to be in a space that you weren't in one accord with.
Yeah.
And so
I've learned over the years that I have to know what I'm getting into, because I've been misled sometimes, and also been part of something that I didn't realize I was being part of, because I just didn't ask the questions that were, that align with me. And life's too short. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is the most impact that I could have. And I loved your response and the production, everything here. It was beautiful, and I was really, really excited to be part of it.
That's the experience that you've had.
Thank you.
And I love her response too, because I made her send it to me.
Yeah.
Man, that sounds great. And that is what we want to do.
Yeah. That's true.
Pretty good, sister-in-law.
Yeah, really good. Really good.
Okay, I need to have my shoulder adjusted.
Oh, sorry.
Now. Okay. So that is going to come to end our second part with Dr. Kim Snider and Village Family Chiropractic. Please visit all of the things, the websites, the socials, and, consider what kind of provider that your family may need right now, and see if anybody there fits that bill. They certainly have experienced a lot of life, and there's compassion and empathy there, and we need a little more of that every day. So, and also in the meantime, follow Legacy Podcast Studio on all the socials. We would love for you to like, follow, and subscribe to YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. I don't know what else we do. That's Lamar's job. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the podcast. See you soon.